The slap cracked across my cheek before the cabin door had even closed. Rachel Carter's hand dropped as she snatched the boarding tablet from my fingers and accused me of sitting in a seat I could never afford. My passport, my jet access card, and my signed fuel consortium approval were now in her hand. Behind her, the cabin screen still showed the airline's pending partnership with Brooks Aviation Capital. One hold from my office could freeze their fuel credit line across 12 airports by morning. The espresso cup beside me trembled in its saucer. A businessman in row 2 stopped breathing for a second. Someone's phone lifted from behind a leather headrest. Rachel looked at me like she had corrected a problem. That was her first mistake. She had not taken a pass. She had taken control from the person who owned the door. The cabin smelled of roasted coffee, polished leather, and rain-damp coats. Outside the oval windows, runway lights blurred against the dark glass. The jet sat at a private terminal in Teterboro, engines humming low beneath our feet. Everyone had been waiting to depart for Chicago. A quick executive flight. 90 minutes in the air. A quiet landing before midnight. That was what the manifest promised. Rachel made it something else. "You people always think a nice coat makes you important," she said. Her voice was not loud. That made it worse. It was meant for the nearby passengers to hear without sounding like a scene. A man near the aisle looked down at his watch. A woman across from me tightened her grip around a champagne flute. Nobody stepped in. Not yet. I touched my cheek. Heat spread beneath my fingertips. I did not raise my voice. I did not stand. I looked at Rachel's name tag first. Then at the tablet in her hand. "Are you sure you want to keep that?" I asked. She gave a small laugh. "Security will decide that." 2 ground agents appeared near the galley curtain. Rachel handed one of them my tablet like evidence. The screen was still awake. Airline Strategic Fuel Guarantee. Final Review. Monica Brooks. My name sat in bold letters under the approval field. Rachel did not look at it. The agent did. His face changed first. Only a little. His eyes moved from the tablet to me, then back to the screen. Rachel missed it. She was too busy performing confidence. She refused crew instructions, Rachel said. And she got aggressive. The word landed cold in the cabin. A few passengers looked up sharply. The phone behind the headrest stayed raised. I heard the quiet click of recording beginning. My pulse stayed steady. That surprised even me. I had learned long ago that rooms like this did not always punish the person who lied first. Sometimes they punished the person who reacted first. So I stayed still. The ground agent swallowed. "Ma'am," he said to Rachel, "we may need to verify the passenger record." "Verify it outside," Rachel snapped. "She is delaying departure." The engine hum deepened beneath the floor. The cabin lights dimmed for takeoff mode, then brightened again when the cockpit paused the sequence. That small change told every frequent flyer something had shifted. Rachel finally noticed the silence around her. Her smile faded slightly. I reached into my coat pocket and removed my phone. 1 missed call glowed from my chief counsel. 3 messages waited from Brooks Aviation Capital. The final one was simple. "Fuel guarantee ready whenever you confirm." Rachel still held my tablet. The ground agent still stared at my name. The aircraft still had not moved. Then the cockpit door opened. The cockpit door opened. Every conversation inside the cabin died instantly. The captain stepped out with a tablet in his hand. The soft cabin lights reflected off the silver wings on his uniform. He looked at Rachel first. Then at the ground agent. Then at me. The air felt heavier. Even the engine hum seemed quieter. Rachel straightened her shoulders. She expected support. I could see it in her posture. She expected the captain to finish what she had started. Instead, he looked down at the tablet. His eyes narrowed slightly. The ground agent handed him the device Rachel had taken from me. The screen was still unlocked. My name remained visible. So did the fuel guarantee file. The captain's expression changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. A businessman across the aisle noticed it. So did the woman with the champagne glass. Rachel did not. She crossed her arms and waited. Captain, she delayed departure, Rachel said. We need to remove her. The captain did not answer right away. He read something on the screen. Then he looked directly at me. Ms. Brooks? He asked. Yes. My voice stayed calm. A tiny pause followed. Rachel shifted her weight. The ground agent looked down at the floor. The captain handed the tablet back carefully. Very carefully. I believe this belongs to you. The cabin became silent enough to hear someone exhale 3 rows behind me. Rachel blinked. What? The captain ignored her question. He looked at the ground agent instead. Can you give us a moment? The agent nodded immediately. Rachel's confidence cracked for the first time that evening. Only a little. But it cracked. The agent stepped back toward the galley. The captain lowered his voice. Ms. Brooks, I apologize for the delay. A phone camera lifted higher behind an aisle seat. Another passenger started recording too. Rachel finally looked at the screen in my hand. Her eyes caught my name. Then the company logo. Then the approval document. Something flickered across her face. Confusion. Then uncertainty. The cabin smelled of coffee and warm leather. Outside the windows, blue runway lights stretched into the darkness. Nobody moved. Nobody wanted to miss what happened next. Rachel tried to recover. Captain, there has been a misunderstanding. Her tone had changed. It was softer now. More careful. The captain looked at her. There certainly has. The businessman near the front quietly turned off his laptop. Even he seemed interested now. I slid my phone back into my coat pocket. 3 new messages had arrived during the last few minutes. One came from legal counsel. Another came from operations. The third came from the vice president overseeing our airport fuel network. I did not open any of them. Not yet. Rachel watched me. Her eyes kept returning to the logo on my screen. She was trying to connect pieces that no longer fit together. The confidence was gone. The certainty was fading. But the flight had not left the gate. The damage had already begun. The captain checked his watch. We are holding departure for a few more minutes. Several passengers exchanged looks. A delay on a private executive route was unusual. A delay caused by cabin staff was even more unusual. Rachel knew it too. A bead of sweat appeared near her temple despite the cool air inside the cabin. She looked toward the galley. Then toward the cockpit. Then back at me. For the first time since she struck me, she actually looked at me. Not through me. Not past me. At me. I met her eyes. I said nothing. Sometimes silence reveals more than an argument ever could. The cabin door remained open. The runway lights glowed beyond the glass. Then Rachel noticed the name at the bottom of the document, and went pale. Rachel's eyes locked onto the signature line at the bottom of the document. The color drained from her face. She looked back at me. Then at the screen again. Then at the captain. The movement repeated twice, as if her mind refused to accept what her eyes were seeing. The cabin remained silent. Even the businessman near the aisle stopped pretending to check his messages. The captain folded his arms. He was no longer confused. Now he was waiting. Rachel swallowed. There has to be some mistake. Her voice sounded smaller. The confidence from 10 minutes earlier was gone. I rested the tablet on the armrest beside me. The screen cast a pale glow across the leather seat. Is there? I asked. The question hung in the air. Nobody rushed to answer it. Outside, a baggage cart rolled past the window. Its yellow lights flashed briefly against the cabin wall. The engines continued their low vibration beneath our feet. The aircraft still had not moved. That fact alone was becoming expensive. Rachel glanced toward the open cabin door. She looked like she wanted an exit. There was none. Not anymore. The ground agent shifted his weight near the galley. He had seen enough. The captain took a slow breath. Rachel, step into the galley for a moment. She shook her head immediately. Captain, I was protecting the cabin. The phone camera behind row 3 stayed fixed on her. Another passenger quietly lowered his sunglasses and watched. The atmosphere had changed. Earlier, Rachel controlled the room. Now the room was studying her. Protecting it from what? The captain asked. Rachel opened her mouth. Nothing came out. The question was simple. That made it dangerous. I could smell fresh coffee from the service station near the galley. Somebody had forgotten to remove a tray. The scent mixed with leather and jet fuel drifting faintly through the open door. Small details suddenly felt sharp, clear, memorable. Rachel looked at me again. For the first time, embarrassment appeared behind her eyes. Not remorse. Not yet. Just the realization that other people were watching. My phone vibrated once inside my coat pocket. Then again. I ignored it. The captain noticed. So did Rachel. The second vibration lasted longer. A call. Then silence. Then another call. Rachel's gaze dropped toward my pocket. Who keeps calling? She asked before she could stop herself. I almost smiled. The captain answered for me. That is not your concern. Another quiet shift passed through the cabin. Rachel took a step back. The movement was small. Still, everyone saw it. The businessman near the aisle finally spoke. I think I have seen her on television. Nobody answered him. But several passengers looked at me more carefully. Rachel did too. She was searching her memory now. Looking for the moment she should have recognized me. Looking for the mistake she could still undo. The problem was simple. Some mistakes only get larger when you notice them late. The cockpit chimed softly. A message from operations. The captain glanced at the display on the bulkhead screen. His expression tightened. That caught my attention. He rarely showed emotion. What happened? I asked. He hesitated. Just for a second. Then he looked directly at me. Corporate operations is asking why this aircraft is still at the gate. Rachel closed her eyes briefly. The words hit harder than anything else so far. This was no longer a cabin dispute. No longer a disagreement between a passenger and a flight attendant. The delay had reached headquarters. The system was beginning to notice. Then the captain's phone rang, and the caller ID made him go completely still. The captain stared at the screen for a long second before answering. The glow from the caller ID reflected in his glasses. I recognized the number immediately. Corporate headquarters. Not operations. Higher. Much higher. The cabin remained frozen. Rachel watched him with growing panic. The captain stepped a few feet away and answered quietly. Even then, the silence around us made every word feel louder. Yes, ma'am. A pause. She is on board. Another pause. His posture straightened. The businessman near the aisle lowered his head as if he suddenly understood the scale of the situation. Rachel noticed it too. Her breathing became uneven. Outside the window, another aircraft taxied past under a line of white lights. Its engines faded into the distance. We remained motionless. Every minute cost money. Every minute created questions. The captain listened for nearly 30 seconds without speaking. Then he glanced toward me. His expression shifted again. Respect. Caution. Maybe both. Understood, he said. I will handle it. The call ended. Nobody moved. Rachel finally broke the silence. Who was that? Her voice sounded fragile now. The captain slipped the phone into his pocket. Headquarters. Rachel blinked. Headquarters? He nodded once. That single motion seemed to drain the rest of the color from her face. The cabin lights reflected against the polished wood trim running along the walls. Somewhere behind me, I settled inside a glass with a soft crackling sound. Small noises suddenly felt enormous. The captain turned toward me. Ms. Brooks, Corporate leadership has requested a full report before departure. I nodded. That seems reasonable. Rachel swallowed hard. A report? She asked. Nobody answered her immediately. That silence told her more than any explanation could. My phone vibrated again. This time I looked. A message from my vice president appeared across the screen. Fuel review meeting moved to 6 a.m. awaiting your approval. I locked the phone and slipped it away. Rachel noticed. She noticed everything now. Every name. Every logo. Every detail she had ignored earlier. Funny how quickly attention arrives after certainty leaves. The captain looked toward the galley. Rachel, I need you to step off the aircraft. The words landed softly. Their effect was not soft at all. Rachel froze. Now? Now. She stared at him. You are removing me? The captain held her gaze. I am asking you to step off the aircraft. A subtle difference. Everyone understood it. Rachel looked around the cabin. Nobody rushed to defend her. The ground agent remained near the doorway. Waiting. The passengers remained silent. Watching. Recording. Remembering. Rachel's eyes found mine again. There was anger there. Fear too. But underneath both was something new. Doubt. She was beginning to realize she had never understood the situation she had walked into. I remained seated. My cheek still carried a faint warmth from earlier. The physical sting had faded. The memory had not. Rachel opened her mouth to argue. Then stopped. The businessman in row 2 quietly closed his briefcase. A woman near the window lowered her phone for the first time in 20 minutes. Nobody wanted drama anymore. They wanted answers. Rachel slowly removed her service tablet from her belt. Her hand shook slightly. She handed it to the captain. The exchange lasted less than 2 seconds. Yet it felt like a door closing. The captain accepted it without a word. Rachel turned toward the exit. Halfway there, she stopped and looked back at me. The cabin lights caught the moisture gathering in her eyes. I thought I was doing my job, she said. I studied her for a moment. The engines continued their low vibration beneath the floor. The runway lights shimmered outside the glass. That was not the only thing guiding you, I replied. Rachel looked away first. Then she stepped into the doorway. The ground agent followed her out. A few seconds later, the cabin door closed. And then another call came for me. My phone vibrated the second the cabin door sealed shut. The sound seemed louder now that Rachel was gone. I looked at the screen. The caller was Evelyn Hart, Chief Executive Officer. The top name on the airline's organizational chart. A few passengers noticed the name reflected briefly across the glass. Their expressions changed immediately. I answered. Monica speaking. The cabin remained quiet enough that I could hear the faint crackle of the connection. Ms. Brooks, Evelyn said. Her voice was calm, but not relaxed. I understand there has been an incident. I glanced toward the captain. He remained near the galley, speaking quietly with operations. That is one way to describe it. A brief silence followed. Evelyn knew better than to rush. People reached executive positions by understanding the value of timing. I would like the opportunity to review everything personally, she said. You will have that opportunity. Another pause. Thank you. The call ended. No promises. No threats. No negotiations. Just facts. Sometimes facts carried more weight than anger ever could. The businessman near the aisle leaned back slowly. He looked like a man watching a storm change direction. The woman with the champagne glass finally set it down. Nobody was pretending not to listen anymore. The captain returned a minute later. We have clearance to depart. His voice was steady. Professional. Yet something about him seemed different now. More careful. More aware. I nodded. Then we should leave. He hesitated. Corporate requested that I personally apologize. The words surprised several passengers. I could hear someone inhale sharply. The captain continued. What occurred should not have happened. I studied him for a moment. The overhead lights reflected softly against the polished cabin walls. Outside, the runway stretched into darkness. Thank you, I said. Nothing more. Nothing less. His shoulders relaxed slightly. Sometimes people expected a speech when a simple acknowledgement would do. He returned to the cockpit. Seconds later the door closed. The aircraft finally began to move. The vibration changed beneath my feet. Slow at first. Then steady. The cabin seemed to exhale as we rolled away from the gate. But something had shifted permanently. The flight was moving forward. The situation was not. My phone vibrated again. This time it was my chief counsel. I answered. How bad is it? He asked immediately. Through the window, blue taxiway lights slid past in neat rows. Worse than the video suggests. Silence. Then a slow breath. There is video? Several. Recordings. Another pause. Understood. I could almost hear him reorganizing tomorrow's schedule in his head. The fuel review meeting is prepared. We are waiting for your decision. I looked out at the runway. Rain droplets streaked across the glass. Tiny rivers of light. No decisions tonight. Monica, not tonight. He stopped talking. He knew me well enough to recognize finality when he heard it. We ended the call. Across the aisle, the businessman carefully closed his eyes. He was not sleeping. He was thinking. Everyone was. The aircraft turned toward the runway threshold. The engines grew louder. A low, rising sound. Familiar. Powerful. The kind of sound that reminds people they are committed now. No turning back. My tablet lit up beside me. A news alert appeared on the screen. Someone had already uploaded a short clip from the cabin. The view count was climbing faster than I expected. Much faster. The aircraft paused briefly before takeoff clearance. The engine settled into a deep rumble. Then another notification appeared. This one came directly from corporate headquarters. And the subject line changed everything. The subject line sat alone at the top of the message. Emergency Executive Review. Mandatory. Before 6 a.m. Eastern. I stared at it while the aircraft waited at the runway threshold. The engines hummed beneath the floor. A low vibration moved through the leather seat and into my hands. Outside the window, white runway lights stretched into the darkness like a chain of distant stars. The notification expanded. Corporate leadership had already assembled a crisis team. Legal counsel. Public relations. Operations. Investor relations. Every department that only appeared when something had gone terribly wrong. The timing caught my attention. The video had been online less than an hour. Yet headquarters was already reacting as if a fire had reached the top floor. The aircraft began to roll forward. Acceleration pressed gently against my shoulders. Several passengers lowered their phones and looked out the windows. Nobody spoke. The engines surged. The runway lights blurred. Then the jet lifted smoothly into the night sky. Manhattan disappeared beneath a blanket of rain clouds. For a few moments, only the sound of flight remained. Steady. Familiar. Predictable. Unlike everything else. My tablet chimed again. Another alert. The video had crossed 2 million views. I read the number twice. The businessman across the aisle saw my expression. That bad? He asked quietly. I turned the screen slightly toward him. His eyebrows lifted immediately. Wow. That was all he said? He did not need more words. Neither did I. The cabin lights dimmed after takeoff. Warm amber reflections glowed along the walls. Flight attendants from the replacement crew moved quietly through the aisle. None of them met my eyes for long. News traveled fast inside an airline. Faster than most people realized. A glass of water appeared beside my seat. No speech. No explanation. Just a careful gesture. I nodded my thanks. The young attendant returned a nervous smile before moving away. My phone vibrated. This time it was not legal counsel. It was the vice president of airport operations. I answered. Tell me something good. He laughed once. Not because anything was funny. Because either of us expected good news. 3 regional partners called within the last 20 minutes. I looked toward the dark window. And? They want to know whether the fuel agreement is still moving forward. The question lingered. Beneath it sat a larger one. Everyone knew it. Nobody wanted to ask it directly. What did you tell them? I said. I told them the decision belongs to you. Silence followed. The aircraft leveled above the clouds. The seatbelt sign remained lit. The cabin felt suspended between 2 worlds. One below. One ahead. That was the correct answer, I said. We ended the call. Another message arrived almost immediately. Then another. Reporters. Industry analysts. Investors. The story was spreading beyond the airline now. People were connecting names. Contracts. Partnerships. Numbers. The consequences were becoming measurable. Across the aisle, the businessman opened a financial news app. His eyes widened. You are trending, he said. I almost laughed. Such a strange phrase for a situation like this. Trending. As if humiliation were a fashion accessory. I glanced at the article he was reading. The headline focused on the video. The comments focused on something else. People were discussing patterns. Experiences. Stories they had never shared before. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. A chill moved through me that had nothing to do with the cabin temperature. This was no longer about one employee. No longer about one flight. The conversation had become larger than the people inside this aircraft. The businessman slowly lowered his phone. I think headquarters is going to have a very long night. He was right. I looked back at the executive review notice. A new attachment had appeared beneath it. Internal Revenue Impact Projection. Confidential. The file size alone made my stomach tighten. Then I noticed who had authorized the report. The authorization line sat at the bottom of the report like a warning light. Evelyn Hart. Chief Executive Officer. Personal Priority Review. I stared at it for a moment, while the aircraft cut smoothly through the darkness above the clouds. That detail mattered. Executives delegated problems every day. They only handled them personally when the problem could reach them. The cabin lights glowed softly overhead. Most passengers had stopped pretending to work. Laptops remained open, but nobody was typing. Everyone was watching their phones instead. The businessman across the aisle refreshed a news page every few seconds. The numbers kept climbing. Views. Comments. Shares. Attention was spreading faster than any official statement could follow. I opened the report. The first page contained projected losses from delayed partnerships, suspended negotiations, and potential customer departures. Conservative estimate. 8 figures. The second page was worse. It assumed additional public attention. Additional media coverage. Additional scrutiny. The total increased dramatically. I closed the file without reading further. Some numbers were large enough to speak for themselves. My phone rang before I could lock the screen. Evelyn again. I answered. Her voice sounded different now. Not panicked. Focused. Have you seen the report? She asked. Enough of it. Silence. Lingered for a moment. I could hear distant voices behind her. Conference room voices. People speaking quickly. People interrupting each other. People trying to stay ahead of events already moving beyond their control. I wanted you to hear this directly from me, Evelyn said. No decisions have been made regarding your agreement. The wording caught my attention. Not your treatment. Not the incident. The agreement. The business relationship. I looked through the dark window beside me. My reflection stared back. That was not the question I was asking. Another pause. Longer this time. Evelyn understood exactly what I meant. I know. Her voice softened slightly. The review team is examining everything. Everything. An interesting word. Companies often used it when they were unsure where responsibility ended. The call ended a minute later. No promises. No requests. Just careful positioning. The businessman glanced over. The chief executive officer? I nodded. He whistled quietly. Then he returned to reading. Even he seemed unsure what to say now. A flight attendant passed through the aisle collecting empty glasses. The young woman who had brought me water earlier avoided eye contact at first. Then she stopped beside my seat. Ms. Brooks? She asked softly. I looked up. Her hands tightened around the service tray. I just wanted to say. She hesitated. What happened should not have happened. The words were simple. Honest. No legal department had written them. No executive had approved them. That made them valuable. I nodded. Thank you? Relief crossed her face. Then she continued down the aisle. The businessman watched her go. Funny, he said. What? He closed his phone. The people with the least authority seem to understand the situation best. I thought about that. He was not entirely wrong. My tablet chimed again. Another article. Another video. Then something new. An internal employee forum had leaked. Thousands of airline workers were discussing the incident among themselves. Some defended the company. Many did not. Former employees were sharing stories. Current employees were asking questions. The conversation was growing in directions nobody at headquarters could control anymore. I scrolled through a few comments. Then one message caught my attention. It had been posted less than 3 minutes earlier. Verified employee account. Rachel Carter. The same woman who had stood over me in the cabin. The same woman who had believed she controlled the room. Her post contained only one sentence. But after reading it, I sat perfectly still. Rachel's post contained only one sentence. I was wrong. I read it twice. Then a third time. The words were plain. No excuses. No explanations. No attempt to redirect blame. Just 5 words sitting alone on a screen viewed by thousands of employees. The businessman across the aisle noticed my expression. What happened? He asked. I turned the tablet slightly. He read the sentence. His eyebrows rose. That is unexpected. I agreed. The aircraft continued through the darkness above the clouds. The cabin lights remained low. Most passengers were quiet now. Some were sleeping. Others were scrolling through updates. The incident had become its own news cycle. Every few minutes another article appeared. Another discussion thread. Another opinion. Yet Rachel's simple statement cut through more noise than any press release could have. My phone vibrated. Evelyn again. I answered. You saw it? She asked immediately. I did. Her voice carried a different tone now. Less corporate. More human. She posted that without permission. I looked back at the sentence. I assumed she did. A brief silence followed. Somewhere in the background of her call, I heard papers moving and multiple conversations overlapping. Headquarters was still awake. The review board is meeting in 30 minutes, Evelyn said. Several executives believe the situation can still be contained. The word contained lingered in the air. Like smoke. Like denial. I watched the faint reflection of my face in the window. And what do you believe? Another pause. Longer this time. I think the situation stopped being about one flight several hours ago. That answer surprised me. Because it was honest. We ended the call shortly afterward. I set the phone down and closed my eyes for a moment. The engines droned steadily. Beneath the cabin floor. A familiar sound. Predictable. Reliable. Unlike people. A few rows ahead, a passenger quietly laughed while reading something on his screen. Another passenger shook her head and typed a comment. The story was growing. Not because of me. Not because of Rachel. Because people recognized something in it. Something they had seen before. something they were tired of ignoring. The young flight attendant returned with a fresh bottle of water. This time she seemed less nervous. "Can I get you anything else?" she asked. I smiled slightly. "No, thank you." She nodded and continued down the aisle. Small kindnesses mattered, especially on nights like this. My tablet chimed again. This notification came from an industry analyst I knew personally. The message was short. 3 airport authorities just called emergency meetings. I stared at the words. That was new. Very new. Airport authorities did not react to social media trends. They reacted to risk. The implications stretched far beyond one company now. The businessman leaned toward me. "Good news?" he asked. "Depends who is reading it." He laughed softly. Then his expression became serious again. "You know what stands out?" I looked at him. "What?" He glanced around the cabin. "You never once asked for revenge." The comment caught me off guard. Maybe because it was true. I had not. I looked out into the darkness beyond the glass. A faint moonlight glow rested above the cloud layer. Calm. Distant. "Revenge does not fix culture," I said quietly. The businessman nodded slowly. He seemed to think about that answer for a long time. Then another alert appeared on my screen. This one was different. Not public. Not media. Internal. Confidential. It came directly from the Executive Review Board. And attached to it was a copy of Rachel's full personnel file. The personnel file remained unopened for several seconds. I stared at the attachment, while the aircraft moved steadily through the night sky. The businessman across the aisle noticed the hesitation. "You are not going to open it?" he asked. I rested my thumb against the screen. The cabin lights reflected softly across the glass surface. "I have not decided." He nodded. Strangely, he seemed to understand. The engines maintained a deep, steady rhythm beneath the floor. Most passengers had settled into a quiet routine of reading, scrolling, or pretending to sleep. Yet the atmosphere remained different. Charged. Waiting. I looked back at the attachment. Confidential Executive Review Material. Rachel Carter Personnel History. The file had not been sent by accident. Someone on the review board wanted me to see it. That alone raised questions. I finally opened it. The first pages contained ordinary information. Employment dates. Performance reviews. Training certifications. Attendance records. Nothing unusual. Rachel had received strong evaluations for years. Multiple commendations. Positive passenger feedback. Recognition awards. The woman described in those reports sounded disciplined. Professional. Reliable. I continued reading. Then I reached the incident section. My attention sharpened immediately. Several prior complaints appeared in the record. Not enough to end a career. Enough to establish a pattern. Comments about assumptions. Complaints regarding passenger interactions. Reports that had been closed after internal reviews. Some were years old. Some were recent. A chill moved through me. Not because of Rachel. Because of what the file suggested. The signs had existed. The system had seen them. The system had continued anyway. The businessman watched my expression carefully. "Bad?" he asked. I exhaled slowly. Complicated. He accepted that answer. A flight attendant passed through the aisle collecting empty cups. The young woman who had spoken to me earlier glanced toward my screen and quickly looked away. News traveled quickly. Internal documents traveled even faster. My phone vibrated. Another message from Evelyn. I opened it immediately. The Executive Review Board is requesting your presence by video conference upon landing. No lawyers. No intermediaries. Direct discussion. I read the message twice. That request mattered. Large organizations rarely prefer direct conversations during crises. Direct conversations created accountability. Accountability made people uncomfortable. I looked out the Window. Moonlight rested across the cloud tops below. The view seemed peaceful, almost disconnected from everything happening on the ground. My phone vibrated again. This time the message came from my chief counsel. Do not agree to anything until we review their position. Sensible advice. Predictable advice. Yet something about tonight felt larger than legal strategy. The businessman folded his hands together. Can I ask you something? I turned toward him. Sure. He hesitated. What happens if they offer you everything you want? The question lingered between us. The cabin remained quiet. A soft air vent hissed overhead. Somewhere farther back, a passenger laughed briefly at something on a screen. Life continued even inside extraordinary moments. I considered the question carefully. That depends. On what? I looked down at Rachel's file again. The prior complaints. The closed reviews. The warnings nobody had truly addressed. Whether they understand the problem. He nodded slowly. Then he looked away. As if the answer made more sense than he expected. The seatbelt sign illuminated briefly as the aircraft encountered a patch of light turbulence. Glasses rattled softly. Several passengers looked up. Then everything settled again. Calm returned. My tablet chimed. Another internal document had arrived. This one carried a different label. Board Recommendation Draft. Preliminary Financial Exposure. I opened the first page. The projected losses were higher than before. Much higher. Then I reached the final section and saw a recommendation nobody in the room would have expected. The recommendation sat at the bottom of the report like a crack running through glass. I read it once. Then again. The Executive Review Board was not recommending damage control. They were recommending a complete independent audit of passenger treatment complaints across the entire airline. I leaned back slowly. The businessman across the aisle noticed immediately. That bad? He asked. I turned the screen off. Bigger than I expected. Outside the window, the clouds had thinned. Patches of moonlight drifted across the wing. The aircraft remained steady. Calm. The opposite of everything happening on the ground. My phone vibrated. Evelyn Hart. Again. I answered before the second ring. You saw the recommendation. It was not a question. I did. Her voice sounded tired now. Not weak. Just exhausted. Like someone who had spent hours watching a problem grow faster than solutions. It was unanimous, she said. That caught my attention. Unanimous decisions at that level were rare. That means the board is worried. A short silence followed. Very worried. I looked around the cabin. Most passengers had settled into quiet observation. Some watched the news. Others watched me. A few simply stared out the windows. The story had become larger than everyone on board. Why send it to me? I asked. Evelyn answered immediately. Because you deserve transparency. The response surprised me. Not because it was dramatic. Because it was simple. Honest answers were uncommon during corporate crises. Thank you, I said. Another pause. Then her tone changed slightly. There is something else. I waited. Papers shuffled faintly in the background. A door opened and closed somewhere near her. Rachel requested to speak during the review. I sat still. The cabin seemed quieter. Even the engine noise faded into the background. And she accepted responsibility. I looked down at the dark screen of my tablet. My own reflection stared back at me. That was her decision. Yes. Evelyn hesitated. Not everyone does that. The call ended a minute later. I sat quietly afterward. Thinking. The businessman folded his newspaper and set it aside. People keep expecting you to react. I looked at him. Maybe. He nodded toward my phone. And you keep disappointing them. That almost made me smile. A flight attendant walked through the aisle checking seatbelts. The young woman who had apologized earlier paused beside my seat. We should begin our descent in about 30 minutes. I thanked her. She nodded and moved on. Small moments. Small kindnesses. They felt more important now. My tablet chimed again. Another internal update. I opened it. This one summarized the executive review meeting in real time. Comments. Recommendations. Concerns. Names attached to each statement. Several executives focused on financial exposure. Others focused on public relations. Then one comment caught my attention. It came directly from Evelyn. If we treat this only as a financial event, we will repeat it. I read the sentence twice. Then a third time. The businessman noticed. What is it? He asked. I handed him the tablet. He read the line and slowly nodded. That might be the smartest thing anyone has said tonight. Maybe it was. Outside the window, distant city lights appeared far below. Chicago. Tiny points of gold scattered across the darkness. The aircraft had begun its descent. The cabin lights brightened slightly. Seatbacks clicked upright. Conversations resumed in low voices. Normal travel sounds. Ordinary sounds. Yet nothing about this night felt ordinary anymore. My phone vibrated one more time. This message came from an unknown number. No name. No title. Just a single sentence. After reading it, I immediately knew who had sent it. The message contained only one sentence. Thank you for not making me the villain forever. I stared at the screen while the aircraft continued its descent toward Chicago. No signature. No explanation. None was necessary. I knew exactly who had written it. Rachel. The words stayed with me longer than I expected. The businessman across the aisle noticed my expression. Good news? He asked. I locked the screen and slipped the phone into my pocket. Not exactly. He smiled faintly. Interesting news, then. That was closer to the truth. Outside the window, city lights stretched across the darkness like rivers of gold. Streets. Buildings. Cars moving through the night. Ordinary lives continuing while executives argued inside conference rooms hundreds of miles away. The cabin lights brightened another level. Seatbelt signs remained illuminated. Flight attendants secured service carts and checked final preparations. Everything felt quieter now. Not because the situation had ended. Because everyone sensed it was changing. My phone vibrated again. This time it was my chief counsel. I answered immediately. The review board wants a conversation the moment you land, he said. I know. Papers shuffled on his end of the line. Several members are pushing for immediate reconciliation. I looked out the window. Reconciliation with me? With everyone watching. That answer carried weight. Public trust was harder to recover than revenue. We both knew it. What are you recommending? I asked. His response came quickly. Take the meeting. Listen first. Sensible advice again. Maybe tonight's sensible advice was enough. We ended the call. The businessman folded his jacket over his lap. You are still going to meet them? He asked. Probably. He laughed softly. Most people would walk away. I thought about that for a moment. The clouds outside had disappeared completely. Chicago filled the horizon now. Bright. Sharp. Real. Walking away is easy, I said. Fixing things is harder. He nodded slowly. Then he looked out his own window. Neither of us spoke for a while. The aircraft began a gentle turn. The city shifted beneath us. Thousands of lights moving together. A living map. My tablet chimed. Another internal update. The review board meeting had ended. Preliminary recommendations were attached. I opened the document carefully. The first items were expected. Policy reviews. Training reforms. Independent audits. Accountability measures. Then I reached the final section. A proposal. Not about contracts. Not about money. About culture. The recommendation called for a passenger advisory council made up of customers, employees, and outside community leaders. A permanent voice independent of corporate leadership. I read the paragraph twice. Then a third time. The businessman noticed. What now? I turned the tablet toward him. He read silently. His eyes widened. They are serious. Maybe they were. For the first time all night, I began to believe that possibility. A flight attendant approached. The same young woman. She smiled carefully. Less nervous now. More confident. We should be on the ground in about 10 minutes. I thanked her. As she walked away, I noticed something simple. She stood a little straighter than before. Small things mattered. Respect mattered. Being heard mattered. Sometimes change started there. The aircraft descended lower. Buildings became visible. Roads. Parking. Lots. Individual headlights moving below. Everything looked close enough to touch. My phone vibrated one last time before landing. Another message from Evelyn Hart. No attachments. No legal language. Just a single question waiting on the screen. And somehow it felt more important than every report I had read tonight. The message from Evelyn contained only one question. What would meaningful change look like to you? I stared at the screen as the aircraft descended through the final layer of night clouds. The question felt different from everything that had come before it. No legal language. No negotiation. No damage control. Just a direct question from one human being to another. Outside the window, runway lights appeared in the distance. Long rows of white and amber stretching across the darkness. The city below seemed quieter from this height. Simpler. My phone remained in my hand. I did not answer immediately. The businessman noticed. That must be an important message. I looked at the screen again. Maybe the most important one tonight. He nodded but did not ask to see it. Some moments deserved privacy. The aircraft continued downward. The engine softened slightly. A familiar change in sound. The feeling of arrival. The feeling that something was ending. Or beginning. I opened a blank reply and stared at the cursor. For years I had attended meetings about inclusion, diversity, accountability, and culture. I had heard presentations. Committees. Promises. Most of them sounded impressive. Few of them changed daily behavior. My fingers hovered above the keyboard. Then I began typing. Meaningful change starts when people stop treating respect like a public relations strategy. I paused. Read it again. Then continued. It requires accountability that exists before a camera appears. It requires listening before a crisis happens. It requires systems that recognize patterns instead of excuses. I stopped typing. The words felt honest. More honest than most corporate statements I had ever read. The aircraft banked gently. The runway lights shifted into alignment. The businessman glanced out the window. Almost there. Yes. I sent the message. No edits. No revisions. Just truth. Seconds later, 3 dots appeared on the screen. Evelyn was already typing a response. The speed surprised me. Then her message arrived. Agreed. Another short pause. Then a second message followed. Would you help us build it? I stared at the words. The cabin seemed unusually still. The young flight attendant secured the final service compartment. Passengers gathered phones and jackets. Seatbacks clicked upright. Normal travel sounds filled the space. Yet everything felt different now. The question was not about a contract. Not about money. Not even about the airline. It was about responsibility. I looked out the window. The runway was close enough to see individual lights reflecting against the damp pavement. I thought about Rachel's message. I thought about the employee forum. The complaints buried inside old files. The executives finally asking different questions. Change was never created by one apology. It was built through thousands of decisions afterward. My phone vibrated again. Evelyn had sent one final message. No pressure. Just know the invitation is real. I smiled faintly. Not because the problem was solved. It was not. Not even close. But for the first time all night, the conversation seemed aimed toward the future instead of the headlines. The landing gear lowered beneath the aircraft with a deep mechanical sound. A few passengers looked up. The businessman adjusted his seatbelt. "Whatever happens next," he said quietly, "it feels bigger than a flight." I looked out at the approaching runway. The lights reflected across the glass like lines of possibility. "It is," I said. The wheels touched the ground a moment later. And my phone lit up once more. My phone lit up before the aircraft even reached the gate. The screen displayed a single notification from Evelyn Hart. The board voted unanimously. I stared at the message while the aircraft rolled slowly across the wet pavement. Outside the window, airport lights reflected off the rain-darkened ground like liquid gold. Passengers began collecting bags. Overhead bins clicked open. The ordinary sounds of arrival returned. Yet the atmosphere inside the cabin still felt connected to everything that had happened. Evelyn's second message appeared a few seconds later. "The audit is approved. The advisory council is approved. The reforms begin immediately." I read the words carefully. Not because I doubted them. Because I understood what they represented. Promises were easy. Implementation was hard. Still, this was movement. Real movement. The businessman across the aisle noticed my expression. "Good news?" he asked. I showed him the screen. He read the messages and smiled. "That is more than I expected." "Me too," I admitted. The aircraft reached the gate and stopped. The engine slowly powered down. The familiar hum that had surrounded us all night faded into silence. Strange how noticeable silence becomes when noise finally leaves. Passengers stood and stretched. Jackets were gathered. Phones disappeared into pockets. Life resumed. Yet before anyone could leave, my phone vibrated again. Another message. This time from Rachel. I opened it slowly. There was no anger. No defense. No request. Only gratitude. "Thank you for seeing a future version of me when I could not." I looked at the sentence for several moments. Then I locked the screen. Some messages deserved reflection rather than immediate replies. The cabin door opened. Cool airport air drifted inside. The scent of rain mixed with jet fuel and fresh coffee from somewhere beyond the terminal. The young flight attendant approached before passengers began exiting. "Ms. Brooks?" she asked softly. I looked up. "Yes?" She smiled. Not the nervous smile from earlier. A genuine one. "I hope we do better." The simplicity of the statement stayed with me. Not "we hope this goes away." Not "we hope the headlines stop." "We hope we do better." I stood and picked up my coat. "So do I said. She nodded and stepped aside. The businessman extended his hand before leaving. I shook it. "I think I witnessed something unusual tonight," he said. "What is that?" He smiled faintly. "A problem becoming an opportunity before it became a disaster." Then he disappeared into the flow of passengers moving toward the terminal. I remained seated for a moment longer. The cabin was nearly empty now. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Ground crew vehicles moved beneath the lights outside. Ordinary work. Ordinary people. The world continuing. My phone vibrated one final time. A news alert. The airline's public statement had just been released. The headline surprised me. Not because it mentioned me. It did not. Not because it mentioned financial losses. It did not. The statement focused on accountability, listening, and change. For the first time all night, the story was no longer centered on a confrontation. It was centered on what came after. I slipped the phone into my pocket and stepped into the aisle. The cabin lights reflected warmly against the polished walls. The same aircraft. The same seats. The same journey. Yet everything felt different now. Sometimes the most important victory is not proving someone wrong. It is creating the possibility that they can become better. I walked toward the open door. The rain-scented air greeted me. And somewhere ahead, a new conversation was already beginning.